Did you not realize I was merely being polite? Oh, you provincials never cease to amaze. I ask that you kindly try not to drag us all down with you. Your oafishness knows no bounds. Not only are you incompetent, but shameless to boot.
Nope, he's pretty much just a dick. But in this video, we're going to examine his character, his motivations, why he's hated. I'm going to try and keep it like everything in sections so I don't ramble off too much in this one. But we're going to start off with who is Seluvis? He's a Carian Preceptor, which is essentially like their version of court mages or court sorcerers like we see in The Witcher or in the Elder Scrolls games. They were forced to wear these gimp-like metal masks on the Order of Radagon, who wanted all matters to be kept strictly private when it came to the nobles and the practitioners of magic who served the nobles. If there was one thing Radagon loved, it was keeping secrets. But they also wear these blue-like kimono-style robes and a wide-brimmed hat with the movement of stars patterned on them, on the inside of the brim. Condescending sorcerers who wear these large wide-brim hats are sort of from Softy and staple that was started by Big Hat Logan all the way back in Dark Souls 1. I believe Seluvis is one of only 2 surviving preceptors as well, the other one being Miriam, who's guarding the Carian study hall. Another character that's been somewhat reviled by the community. But Seluvis is one of Ranni's 3 accomplices, the others being War Counselor Iji and Wolfman Blythe. As an example of how much of a dick he is, everybody else shows up for the meeting in some kind of a hologram projection form because they're likely pretty far away. Like Iji's over on the roadside on the other side of the manor, and Blythe is all the way over in Limgrave. But Seluvis is right next door, and instead of showing up in person, he just sends a projection of himself. It seems about right, you know, given the character, but that's just a small example of who Seluvis is. Seluvis is the type of guy to tell you to come see him for help, and then when you go see him, he tells you, "Oh, I was just being polite. Why would I ever help you?"
Bloody Seluvis. I suppose he's up to something again. Are you really going to do the bidding of that twisted dolly botherer?
Well. Seluvis is not a name I ever wanted to hear again.
And most characters that are acquainted with him kind of think of him rather disparagingly, as I don't think anybody kind of refers to him kindly, besides Selen, who kind of just refers to him rather mildly, while Ranni and Blythe are more like,
"Perhaps it's time to ask Seluvis." I recall that spiteful little rat acting like he knew something.
The depths of wickedness never fail to surprise me. I am saddened that thou wouldst succumb to such depravity, led astray by Seluvis with devious tonic in hand. Didst thou think to have thy way with me?
it's very likely he's pretty old, as Iji himself is quite old, and Blythe and Ranni are pretty old despite not aging normally. Obviously, sorcerers live longer than people as they just kind of switch out bodies using primal glintstones.
Someone may come for my life, and so I entrust it with you, myself. My apprentice. Just how long has it been? Thank you. You've helped me fill a new body once again, and it's truly a gem. Young and full of vigor, a snug fit for my primal glintstone.
Sometime after the shattering, though, he became a reoccurring acquaintance of Gideon the All-Blowing, to the point where they're even considered good friends. Now you're probably thinking, of course these 2 creepy-ass old dudes were good friends, and yeah, one of the least surprising things I've ever found out in this game, to be honest. So for the sake of structure, we're going to go over a couple of Gideon's many crimes. He had the Albinoric village sacked in search of the Haligtree medallion because he's obsessed with trying to figure that out in an attempt to be all-knowing. He also put Latina's wolf to sleep, which as a fucking husky owner really pissed me off, and it definitely put him at the top of my list of people I wanted to kill. I definitely despise him more than Seluvis, that's for sure. At least Seluvis has a couple of redeeming qualities, which we'll get to. I'm not just going to throw something like that out there and not get to it.
Foul tarnished. What do you want? I told the all-hearing brute that I possess no such medallion. Or have you come to take more from me? Was my other half not enough?
But yeah, a good portion of my first playthrough was dedicated to killing that gamer-necked son of a bitch. Anyway though, moving on. This Witch King of Angmar cosplayer also seems to possess a puppet in the form of Ensha. Now I didn't consider this, which is pretty dumb of me, admittedly, but until someone pointed it out. But yeah, Ensha is very likely just Gideon's puppet. Maybe he was even a gift given to him from Seluvis, back when they were butt buddies. And he's pretty much condescending in like a Ned Stark sort of way. Like when you first meet him, he's pretty much a dick to you, but after you spank a couple demigods, all of a sudden he's offering you spells for info on the other ones that he hasn't located yet. So it's like he's now admitted that he isn't so fucking all-knowing, now is he? But he pretty much pretends to respect you and shines you on as you progress through the game, which in my opinion is like the opposite of Seluvis, who is condescending to you right off the fucking bat. Anyway though, these two stopped being BFFs after a chick named Dolores, who liked to dress as a tomboy, criticized Gideon at some point, at which point I think Gideon was like, he was cool with it, but Seluvis was like maybe felt slighted by it, or maybe she criticized Seluvis too. But what we do know is that she's now a puppet, and what we can infer is that Seluvis turned her into a puppet, and that event is what caused him to finally hate Seluvis or part ways from Seluvis, to the point in the game where he's referring to him as a twisted dolly botherer or some shit like that. He just really seems to not like Seluvis. But what's goofy is that he says, well, we'll pull one over on him, but apparently, pulling one over on Seluvis is apparently just disposing of the poison or whatever and giving it to nobody.
A determined plebeian is more wicked than an omen horn, quite frankly.
Which, of course, is proving once again that Gideon is just as lame at pulling one over on somebody as he is at every other aspect of being himself. Anyway, back to Seluvis. I like the theory that he made the fake mask of Blythe because it's right there in his tower, behind his tower, and really there's no other real explanation for it other than that. It hasn't been proven, but it's definitely worth mentioning. We can infer from the Nox Swordstress puppet that the art of puppeteering or creating puppets likely originated in the Eternal Cities, or its practices and use there predate that of Carrion use, obviously, or Seluvis' use. Most of the reasons the average player hates Seluvis often has to do with his twisted ass obsession with the puppets themselves.
It will produce the finest of puppets, which I aspire to cherish with these very hands. Quite the keen paramour, aren't we? But I'm afraid each and every one is like a child to me. I can hardly just give them away.
Which to me is more reminiscent of like a super obsessed artist, but it does not make him any less of a creep. So we don't know how he discovered the art of puppet crafting or puppet making, but it can be assumed that he studied the Eternal Cities long enough and discovered it at some point and put it into practice when it came to the Carrions and even the Academy, as we can see marionettes being used in all types of warfare and, lingering on battlefields that were fought a long time ago, still patrolling the areas. Often outside of places that have to do with sorcery, like in Celia, the town of sorcery, or anywhere in Liurnia where it was clearly evidence that these marionettes were fighting against forces of Landel. Until, of course, the civil war that came later where the Carrions were fighting the Academy. But not far from Ranni's Rise, you can find Seluvis' super creepy-ass hidden room, and inside there he's got probably what appears to be his most prized puppets, which we're going to go over right now for the fuck of it, why not? First off is Finger Maiden Theralina. She's very likely the player character's Finger Maiden who was captured by Seluvis at some undisclosed point and turned into a puppet because, he opposes the Golden Order, so it makes sense for him to want to have like a trophy puppet of one of their Finger Maidens. It's pretty creepy, pretty twisted, but it makes sense given that he fought wars against them. I also think she serves as his presence at the Radon Festival, obviously not bothering to show up himself because, you know, that's a very Seluvis thing to do, is to not show up himself and to send a puppet in his place. He managed to get himself a big-ass Omen Killer puppet too, and some people have assumed that this is the Omen Killer that sacked the Albinauric village, but they could both exist at the same time. Obviously, we see several Omen Killers, and that Omen Killer doesn't just show up there after you've defeated the one at the Albinauric village, so they're obviously not the same, but definitely a fun theory. It's really unknown how he got his hands on that. I mean, he could probably easily defeat an Omen Killer, so I guess it's not too hard to figure out. There's a Nox Swordstress or a Nox Monk puppet down here too that isn't the one that you can get in the game, because the one you get in the game is these two sisters that you find in the Eternal Cities, but it implies he either found that puppet, maybe it was the first one he found that taught him how to make puppets, or he learned how to make puppets after finding that one. But it likely predates any of the ones he has because it's a Nox one, and I highly doubt he went down and specifically captured a Nox and turned him into a puppet. It just seems like weird for him to go out of his way to do that. Seems more likely it was the one that inspired his puppet making to begin with. The Dolores puppet is down here too, as well as the Nefeli one if you give her the potion. There's also a puppet I like to call Not Selen because it's not Selen even underneath the mask, but she eventually gets that body anyway. It's a puppet body I believe he made for Selen. Seluvis admits to helping her escape the academy before, so why not, you know?
There's a glintstone sorcerer by the name of Selen in Limgrave. She owes me for the help I gave her when she was expelled from the academy.
It makes sense to me. I mean, Selen's goals go against that of the Carrion family, and Seluvis is a traitor to the Carrion family, so it makes sense that he would allow her to kind of go about her business and be destructive in this chaotic force towards the Carrions so as to draw attention away from his schemes. Shit, maybe he was making the puppet for that express purpose, to make it look like Selen was back and causing trouble to draw suspicions off of him. Who knows? The Dung Eater puppet is also there if you happen to give him the potion, but Seluvis doesn't really react to it. He gives you the same reaction as if you gave the potion to Gideon or just didn't give it to Nefeli at all, which I thought was funny, but it still winds up in his basement, so he would have to have seen it and put it there. Or maybe he just leaves that shit to Pidia, who, like I said, is probably just his servant, or at some point was his apprentice, who he now has demoted to just basically be his bitch, who he keeps in his like little storage closet to clean up his puppets so he doesn't have to. Which to me explains the close proximity between Pidia's little storeroom and Seluvis' tower. The final puppet I believe he has in his little creepy ass storeroom is the Jarwhite one. Now, when the game launched, I saw a lot of people talking about how they met Jarwhite as an NPC and they talked to him, and they saw him before he became a puppet. But that appears to be impossible because he's just there from the beginning of the game in that dungeon. I mean, I'm not, calling them liars, but I haven't seen any actual proof of Jarwhite as an NPC, and while that would be really cool, I don't think it was ever true. But, Jarwhite was some dude who was really obsessed with the warrior jars, and he really wanted to become the innards of a jar. And at some point, he even came across Alexander and asked him, can you consume me? Can you put me in the jar? And Alexander said, nah, not yet. But one day, I'll consider you worthy, and, I'll allow you to join the colony. That day, of course, would never come, as Jarwhite met his fate at the hands of Seluvis and was turned into a puppet, probably just for amusement's sake. His reasons for wanting Nefeli as a puppet seem to me pretty clear. I mean, she's Godfrey's descendant, which he may or may not know about, and she's the adoptive daughter of his rival Gideon, so of course he would want to steal her and turn her into a puppet to pull one over on him. See, he's way better at Gideon at pulling one over on somebody. I mean, that's pretty fucking epic. He's like, look man, I turned your fucking adoptive daughter into my fucking slave, and I'm going to do with her whatever I want. I mean, that sounded creepy as hell. It was creepy to even say, but, that's pretty much who Seluvis is. Bad guy, but not bad at owning his enemies. So what are Seluvis' goals? Well, if you get him to trust you enough to the point where he considers you something like an apprentice...
You're proving to be quite the puppeteer. I've not had an apprentice for a very long time indeed.
Then he'll let you in on his ultimate plan, and that's to turn Ranni into a demigod puppet with the help of this stuff called Amber Starlight, and he basically wants to turn her into the strongest, best puppet of them all.
Perhaps you'd be interested in a little scheme of mine. It will produce the finest of puppets, which I aspire to cherish with these very hands. A ploy to fool even Lady Ranni. How does that sound?
So if you go through with helping Seluvis, it really only leads to ruin for him. He gets killed by Ranni, which also happens if you give the Finger Slayer blade to Ranni, indicating that he attempted the scheme on his own and failed in the same way. But the question remains that outside of his insanely heinous-ass obsession with puppets, why does he want to do this? Why does he want to put himself in this kind of danger and take the risk of trying to imprison a demigod? Obviously, I don't have a straight-up answer, but allow me to theorize a little bit for you guys. So the Shattering was basically just a bunch of beings that were born into nobility and even godhood, fighting over power in the form of grey runes. No different than the many civil wars that take place in like A Song of Ice and Fire or the ones that happen in real life. And they were basically using the armies that were made up of citizens of their lords' respective territories, accompanied often by mercenaries and slave soldiers also, to basically fight it out in some of the most gruesome battles the lands between had ever witnessed, all because of the squabbling of a bunch of fancy pants demigods who were born into power and, influence. Stuff like that is pretty common to George R. R. Martin's work. I mean, when the nobles bicker, the people of the land die. That's a pretty... I'm butchering that actual saying or whatever, but that's the gist of it. And not to mention, there's no real reason in this universe for these demigods to use their armies to fight their battles for them. But no, they only bother to have epic-ass anime fights every once in a blue moon, and even then, there's never a clear victor. They both always walk away from the fight. Doesn't make any fucking sense. I'd be frustrated with the goddamn demigods too, if I was used to fight wars for fucking demigods who didn't give a shit about me, and are only fighting because they have personal squabbles with each other and want each other's fucking great runes. Is it so bad then that Seluvis wants to be free from Ranni? I mean, granted, he wants to turn her into his puppet, and almost all of his puppets are female, so...
To get the ladies nice and tipsy topside, so we can take them to a nice, comfortable place below deck, and, they can't refuse, because of the implication.
That's super weird. I'm definitely not discounting that. That's all insanely weird, and his obsession with puppets, that's all coming with it. But you gotta respect the man's courage to be trying to play this game. I mean, Ranni's other accomplices are a big-ass troll with a mirror helm, a wolf man who's supposedly her brother and her sworn shadow, and a fucking sorcerer devouring dragon. I mean, come on. So we've already established that Seluvis is probably a pretty bad guy, but at the same time, he didn't ask to be involved in a conspiracy against the greater will and, the fingers and all that. Ranni just, jumped into doing that without her accomplices really consent. They're just loyal to her. They have to serve her regardless of what they want. I mean, look at Blythe. He literally is like programmed to serve her as long as she's doing what the two fingers want her to do, but she decides to go against that at the cost of, Blythe's sanity. So, E.G. does the humane thing and tries to lock him up so no one has to kill him, but from that point, Blythe is pretty much gone, and after he finally does die, E.G. follows suit right after. Both are attacked by Black Knife assassins who everybody says were loyal to Ranni, but really don't seem to be. That seems to, if anything, prove that they were loyal to America. I have a theory that, Ranni and Marika were accomplices when it came to the Night of the Black Knives, but at some point Ranni did something that Marika didn't want her to do. Possibly the death of Godwin might have had something to do with that. It's really unclear, but it would explain the Black Knife assassins taking out Ranni's accomplices after she'd ascended. But I suppose that could be Ranni's work too. I mean, like the ending of Goodfellas or something. She just has all the people who know about what she did taken out, besides you, of course, because you're the one who's going to, marry her or whatever. But when you consider all that, I mean, she really just uses them as pawns, and can you really blame Seluvis for trying to get one over on her? I mean, come on. It doesn't make him any less of a creep, of course, but I'm just saying. Look how the Wolfman and E.G. story ended. I mean, sure, E.G. was, willing to go to his death at the end for everything he committed, and he knew what was coming if you go off the description of his helmet. He was scared every day. He wore that Nox-like mirror helmet to hide from the fingers. He knew one day they would come for him. And he finally did after Ranni went off to go chill in the stars. While Wolfman Jack killed his two assassins and, has to be put down by the player, of course. I said in a previous video or a couple previous videos that Ranni is like a master manipulator, but she's not really a manipulator at all. She just has these people who are sworn to do what she says, and she just uses them like pawns. Not really manipulating at all. She's very clear with what she's doing right from the get, but she does use people like pawns just like Gideon. Just an observation. And now to the best part of the video. So I don't think Pidia is Seluvis. I don't think Pidia is some puppet mastermind pulling all the strings. I think that there's some evidence for that case a little bit if you look at it like a certain way. Like the fact that their deaths are synced, but I mean, again, that could just be chalked up to the fact that all the puppets were created by Seluvis, and when he was actually finally killed, that his puppets kind of just gained some kind of autonomy and killed fucking Pidia because he was the one who kept repairing them to go out and fight again. And, you know, Pidia just seems super creepy, like how he's talking to him, I loved you and all that. Like, that doesn't really indicate, that doesn't even sound like Seluvis. Yeah, he's obsessed with his puppets, but he wouldn't, I mean, obviously they're two different voices too, but we'll get into that. Actually, Seluvis uses the specific word love as well, but he could have just taught this to Pidia because Pidia is his apprentice. They both sell Carrion Retaliation, although I think one of them sells the Ash of War and the other one sells the spell. Definitely doesn't make them the same person though. Pidia also sells the map that leads to the Amber Starlight, but I don't think this proves that him and Seluvis are the same person either. I mean, he's Seluvis's like henchman who's clearly managing his storeroom and organizing his storeroom with all the puppets and all that. He even says he's scrounging together anything he could find in that storeroom that's worth selling to sell you. There's also the fact that from like a timeline perspective, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, if Seluvis is Pidia or is being controlled by Pidia, for how long has he been? Because we know Seluvis existed and was a person for at least a good amount of time, and Pidia is just an Albinoric, and Albinorics have a pretty short lifespan when it comes right down to it. I mean, their legs fail and then they eventually die shortly after.
My legs will soon fade, and with them my life. Alas, this is the immovable fate of all Albinorics.
There's also the fact that we never see any puppets talking, they just kind of stand there and do its master's bidding. And if Pidia is controlling Seluvis, is it all the time? I mean, is it from no matter how far away Seluvis is? I think Pidia, if anything, is Seluvis's former apprentice or some kind of servant or henchman, but I definitely don't think he's the one pulling the strings of Seluvis. I think Seluvis having a puppet body can be chalked up to the fact that he can put his primal glintstone into a puppet body, as we see in Selen's Quest. There's also a really big possibility that Seluvis was never a puppet, at least when we talked to him, and that he was turned into a puppet by Ranni for being a rat, as a sort of poetic means of punishment, as he's still able to trade puppets and stuff. He's still somewhat in there. It's sort of like Sorceress Selen being turned into a starseed, and that she could still sell her sorceries and stuff like that, in the same way that Seluvis can still sell puppets. And I know I'm probably getting nitpicky at this point, but you can find Seluvis's dead body and then never go to where Pidia is at, and then, you know, maybe beat the whole game, come back, and then find Pidia getting murdered. So it's just like, what, the neural link severed, but Pidia was just doing his thing until you got near it? I know that's just super nitpicky, and I just find it hard to believe that this Albinoric sorcerer who uses the same model as the Albinorics we find around Carrion Manor or the Albinoric village with the little wand and everything is somehow pulling one over on Ranni. I don't know. I don't see how that's possible. I mean, what, she just thinks she's been dealing with the real Seluvis this whole time? I don't know. There's too much suspension of disbelief, and I know that's what a lot of these games are about, but I think the Pidia is Seluvis theory is a bit like the Karthus Sandworm is Solaire theory. It's a fucking theory I love, you know what I mean? I love the theory of Solaire ending up a giant worm that's using lightning strikes down in the smoldering lake. I like that. To me, this just seems more like a possibility, but not a very likely one. And not one that I'm personally subscribing to. I mean, there's nothing wrong if you think Pidia is Seluvis. I mean, there's evidence that supports it. I mean, if they are the same person, why didn't fake Seluvis just tell you to get the map from his servant Pidia, who you'd supposedly already talked to? You know, if he actually wants the job to get done, why wouldn't he help you out with it? It seems like he really forgot about the map, and that Pidia found it, and it just seems to be a coincidence that he's selling it. I think another point I saw someone mention was how he refers to you. He says, oh, it's you, your worship. Now, it seems to hint that he had just talked to you as Seluvis. But he has that introduction even if you've never talked to Seluvis before. One thing I can't really figure out is why there's a pacification field in his room, other than to keep people from killing him so that they actually get to witness his death. But some people think Seluvis put it there to keep people from killing his actual body. I think if anything, Seluvis put it there so that the puppets don't kill his creepy-ass henchmen. Again, not saying Seluvis isn't creepy as well, but I mean, look at his fucking henchmen and look how he talks to the puppets as they're killing him. I think it's possible that that pacification shield was only there to keep Pidia from getting ripped to shreds by his, by Seluvis's puppets, while Seluvis was away doing business and doing his own thing. I think that's why when Seluvis dies, the pacification field goes down, and the puppets all gain autonomy and then rip Pidia to shreds, because they hated him. He's like a sort of inverted version of the floor presence. I mean, he looks just like the floor presence from Bloodborne, but is actually much more sinister, while the floor presence was just a guy who wanted friends. So in short though, Seluvis is still a super creepy predator motherfucker, but his powers can be used for good if you turn the Dung Eater into a puppet, giving the Dung Eater the most fitting end he could possibly ever have. But it's possible you can color his actions as a sort of wanting to be free from the demigods, which isn't so different from Ranni herself, wanting to be free from the outer gods. It just shows that the Carians often resort to scheming when it comes down to getting that kind of stuff done. I think Pidia himself is likely just unfortunate collateral damage of Seluvis's treachery. I mean, for all we know, Pidia wasn't even creepy to the puppets. I mean, maybe they just hated being repaired and being sent back out into battle. Or maybe they just hated the fact that they were puppets robbed of all free will. Also, the fact that Pidia drops the Nefeli or Dolores puppet to me doesn't really prove that he's the one pulling the strings. I mean, he's a Carian servant charged with maintaining puppets and repairing puppets and keeping the puppets clean and all that. Why wouldn't he have the puppet on him? I mean, he serves the Carians, and Seluvis is a Carian preceptor who serves the nobles. So, I mean, and sure, Seluvis is just as treacherous as the tribunal from Morrowind. But still, it makes sense that Pidia, his servant, would be maintaining the puppets. Plus, the puppet is physically in his dungeon, which I guess people could see as more evidence that they're the same person. But to me, I don't know. I'm not convinced. But I've been rambling long enough on the subject, and that's really all I had to say about that. So, as usual, if you guys liked it, please like. If you disliked it, please dislike it. I hope you found it informative, and if you like my channel in general, I would suggest maybe subscribing. That would be really awesome. The next video will either be about Rennala, or I'll finally finish that demigod video. There's definitely a whole list of ones to come after that, but I will see you guys next time. Have a good one. See ya.
The soul of every puppet has its own ambience. You'll soon come to know once you possess a few. And once each's predilections are known to you, the better you will be able to love them. Oh yes, you have much to look forward to further down this road.
No. I am the Dung Eater. I am.